Welcome to Candlelight Mystery, a calm space for classic British storytelling. Each tale offers quiet suspense, thoughtful characters, and gentle detective intrigue. Wander through peaceful villages, old libraries, and hidden secrets as every clue slowly glows into focus. Light a candle and enjoy mysteries told with calm, steady charm. When the night settles and the world grows quiet, a single candle can reveal more than daylight ever could. At Candlelight Mystery, every story begins with a small spark of doubt, a faint clue, or a quiet whisper that something is not quite right. Step into calm British settings where shadows hide gentle secrets and every character carries a piece of the puzzle. As the flame flickers, motives shift, truths bend, and mysteries slowly unfold. Follow each trail with patience, curiosity, and a steady mind. Light the candle, lean closer, and discover the contrasti. Hidden stories waiting just beyond the silence. Chapter 1. The Quiet Arrival. Oxford glimmered beneath a pale autumn sun, its spires rising like watchful guardians over centuries of knowledge. The cobbled streets carried the steady shuffle of students, bicycles with rattling bells, and the quiet hum of scholars moving between lectures. It was a city where tradition rested comfortably on the shoulders of each building, and where every corner whispered a story waiting to be discovered. Hercule Poirot stepped out of the black motorcar with an appreciative nod. He adjusted his hat, smoothed his moustache with pride, and surveyed the grand entrance of Street Aldwyn College. The stone archway framed a courtyard filled with ivy, statues of past scholars, and a sense of solemn order. To Poirot, it was the perfect place for a guest lecture on the science of criminal detection. He took a careful step forward, admiring the symmetry of the buildings. The college porter, a tall man with round spectacles, greeted him warmly. Poirot offered a small bow and allowed the man to escort him through the courtyard. Several students paused to stare. Their expressions carried the excitement of those who had only heard stories of the famous detective and now saw him in person. Inside the hall, the scent of old books and polished wood filled the air. Poirot walked with the gentle confidence of someone who understood both space and people. His eyes did not miss the detail of the staff moving briskly in preparation for the evening ceremony. The college was preparing to honor one of its most respected professors, Dr. Malcolm Hargrave, with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Poirot was looking forward to meeting the professor, whose essays on medieval history had earned international admiration. But he was not the only guest arriving in Oxford that day. Across the city, Miss Jane Marple stepped out of a small bus, her handbag tucked under her arm. The air was crisp, and she took a deep breath, enjoying the gentle scent of autumn leaves. She looked around the quaint street with the calm curiosity that always guided her. Miss Marple had come to visit her old friend, Mrs. Amelia Carter, who lived near one of the quieter colleges. Amelia had written to her about a recent excitement in Oxford, and Miss Marple thought it might be a pleasant distraction to visit. She was fond of peaceful journeys, and she always believed that where people lived, so did their small troubles, temptations, and secrets. She walked slowly toward Amelia's cottage, admiring the bookshops and tea rooms along the way. A group of students hurried past, discussing their papers with enthusiasm. A professor with white hair cycled by, his scarf trailing behind him. It was all wonderfully busy, yet pleasantly ordered. Amelia greeted Miss Marple with warm delight. After tea and conversation, Amelia mentioned the evening ceremony at Street Aldwyn College. She invited Miss Marple to accompany her, and although Miss Marple had no great interest in formal events, she accepted out of mild curiosity. There was always something interesting to observe in academic circles, even if only the interactions of people who prided themselves on intellect. As evening approached, the city softened under the orange glow of street lamps. The guests gathered in the college hall, where tall windows reflected candlelight and the gentle murmur of conversation filled the air. Poirot stood near the front, studying the decorations while exchanging polite greetings with a few scholars. Miss Marple and Amelia entered quietly. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the room with gentle interest. She recognized no one, of course, but she observed the subtle dynamics, the way two lecturers stood stiffly apart, the manner in which a young researcher clutched a notebook too tightly, the slight tension on the face of the librarian arranging papers on a table. Little things, barely noticeable, but the kind Miss Marple never ignored. Poirot, meanwhile, felt the shift in the atmosphere moments before anyone else reacted. A startled cry echoed from the far end of the hall. A young student ran through the doorway, her face pale, her voice trembling. She called for help urgently before she could say anything coherent. Part of the crowd turned toward her with confusion. Poirot moved immediately. Miss Marple also stepped back slightly, watching carefully with calm but alert eyes. Students rushed forward, and Poirot gently parted through them, asking the frightened girl what had happened. The student pointed toward the library wing. Her breath shook as she whispered. Poirot did not need to hear more to understand that something serious had occurred. He led the group toward the library. Miss Marple followed behind at a steady pace, Amelia clutching her arm nervously. The hallway felt colder than before. A door stood open at the far end. Poirot entered first. The library, usually a sanctuary of quiet thought, was heavy with stillness. A lamp flickered on one of the tables. Books lay scattered on the floor, and near the center of the room, beside an open manuscript case, lay the still figure of Dr. Malcolm Hargrave. Poirot crouched beside the body, his face solemn. Miss Marple stood near the entrance, watching the entire scene with steady eyes. She did not approach, but she noted every small detail. A tipped chair, a broken quill, a footprint near the rug. Poirot looked up, meeting her gaze across the room. There was a silent understanding between them. Something dark had happened in this place of learning, and the quiet city of Oxford was about to reveal its secrets. The moment the alarm spread through the college, the hall shifted from festive anticipation to uneasy murmur. The guests were ushered out under the supervision of the college staff, leaving the corridors empty except for Poirot, Miss Marple, and the few faculty members who remained in a state of shock. Poirot stood slowly and surveyed the library with deliberate care. He instructed everyone to stay outside the doorway. Miss Marple quietly complied, though she kept her eyes on every movement within. The library itself was a grand chamber with towering shelves, long study tables, and portraits of past scholars hanging from the walls. It was a place designed for thought, reflection, and knowledge. Tonight, however, it held the cold weight of something far heavier. Poirot circled the body. Dr. Hargrave lay on his back, his glasses crooked near his hand. His expression was one of mild surprise, not pain. Poirot noted this with interest. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, except for the single chair. His hands were clean. The manuscript case beside him was open, but the manuscript was missing. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward to observe from her distance. She was careful not to intrude, but her mind was already at work. She quietly asked the porter, who stood trembling in the doorway when the professor had last been seen. The porter answered that Dr. Hargrave had been working in the library during the afternoon, preparing a section of the manuscript for display. He had seemed excited but also tense. Poirot overheard this and nodded. Tension suggested pressure or fear. Excitement suggested anticipation. Together they created an interesting combination. He bent down to examine the professor's coat. A faint trace of ink stained the edge of the sleeve. Poirot checked the quill on the floor. It was snapped, but it did not seem to be the cause of the professor's distress. It was likely broken during a struggle too light to be violent. Poirot's eyes moved to a small scrap of parchment near the desk. It was torn, the writing unclear except for part of a letter. He picked it up gently, careful not to disturb the fibers. Miss Marple watched the way he handled the clue with appreciation. She stepped quietly to the porter and spoke in a soft voice. She asked whether Dr. Hargrave had visitors that day. The porter mentioned a heated discussion he overheard between the professor and a younger colleague, Dr. Leonard Shaw. Shaw was known for his ambitious nature and had recently clashed with the late professor regarding the direction of their joint research. Miss Marple thanked him and returned to her place at the door. She did not interrupt Poirot's methodical examination, but she knew enough to suspect personal conflict. Poirot moved to the desk. Papers were neatly arranged except for one corner where a stack had been disturbed. A small key ring rested near the lamp. One key was missing. Poirot raised an eyebrow at this discovery. Keys were never displaced by accident in his experience. He turned to the students gathered in the hall. He asked calmly who had discovered the body. The same girl who had raised the alarm stepped forward. Her voice shook as she explained that she had come to fetch a reference book when she found the professor on the floor. Poirot examined her hands and noticed a faint smudge of dust from the doorframe. He asked whether she touched anything. She insisted she did not. Poirot believed her. Her fear seemed genuine. Behind him, Miss Marple considered the situation. She quietly asked Amelia whether the professor had family in Oxford. Amelia said he had a nephew who often visited. The nephew had a reputation for financial mismanagement, and some whispered that he sought support from the professor more than affection. Miss Marple stored this information gently in her mind. Poirot, meanwhile, returned to the body. He examined the professor's pulse point with a soft touch and checked the angle of the limbs. He concluded that the death had occurred recently, within the last hour. The ceremony had drawn the staff and students away from the library, giving someone a perfect opportunity. He stood and turned toward Miss Marple, acknowledging her quiet yet steady presence. "I believe we are dealing with a matter that is not simple," he said. Miss Marple nodded politely. "Academic circles can be complex," she replied. "People value their reputations, their discoveries, and their quiet ambitions." Poirot smiled faintly. Then he turned more serious. "The missing manuscript," he said, "is likely not a simple theft. It may be the motive behind the murder." Miss Marple considered this but shook her head slightly. "I think perhaps the motive may lie deeper than papers," she said. "People do not kill for knowledge alone. They kill for pride, for fear, for resentment, or for secrets they wish to keep hidden." Poirot admired the quiet confidence in her observation. He knew she possessed a remarkable intuition, one rooted not in theory, but in understanding human nature. Together they walked slowly through the library, Poirot examining evidence, Miss Marple observing character. It was an unusual partnership, but one that the moment required. They had barely begun when the college principal entered, his face pale and tense. He demanded to know what had happened. Poirot explained briefly. The principal was devastated. He insisted that Oxford had never experienced such a tragedy. Miss Marple listened gently and then asked a quiet question. Who had access to the library at this hour? The principal paused. "Many," he said, "but only a few knew the manuscript would be here today." Poirot turned, his eyes bright. "Then," he said, "those few will need to be questioned at once." Miss Marple folded her hands calmly. "Oxford," she said, "has its secrets. Now they will begin to surface." Chapter 2. A college full of secrets. Morning light spread softly across the ancient walls of Street Aldwyn College. The ivy on the stone shimmered with dew, and the courtyard was unusually quiet. The usual chatter of students was replaced with cautious whispers. News of Dr. Hargrave's death had travelled quickly, though no one spoke of it loudly. In the principal's private sitting room, Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his hands neatly folded. Across from him, the principal, Sir Reginald Vale, looked tired and strained. A silver tray of tea stood untouched between them. Miss Marple sat calmly near the window, her hands resting lightly on her handbag. She seemed, to an untrained eye, like any elderly lady visiting a relative. Only someone attentive would see the alertness in her eyes and the quiet watchfulness in her face. Poirot spoke first. "Sir Reginald, For us to understand what has happened, we must begin with the people. Tell us, if you please, about those closest to Dr. Hargrave." Sir Reginald sighed. Dr. Hargrave was a respected figure, brilliant, careful, sometimes stern. He had his disagreements, of course, but that is not unusual in academic life. The Graham's way. Disagreements can be very important, Poirot replied gently. Who among the staff had recent conflict with him? Sir Reginald hesitated, then answered, "Dr. Leonard Shaw, young, ambitious. They shared a research project on the medieval manuscript. There were rumors of tension regarding authorship and interpretation." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Ambition in such circles can be quite sharp, I imagine." The principal nodded. "Shaw is known for wanting to move quickly. Dr. Hargrave was more traditional. He believed in caution and precision." Poirot noted this, then asked, "And the students? Any special connections?" "There is Miss Clara Finch," Sir Reginald said, "a promising graduate student. She worked closely with Dr. Hargrave. Also his nephew, Edward Hargrave, visited often, though not in an official capacity. The professor was his guardian after his parents died. Miss Marple's gaze softened at that. "Did the nephew depend on him?" she asked. "In more ways than one, I suspect," Sir Reginald replied. "Financially, certainly, and perhaps emotionally, though the professor did not speak of personal matters often." Poirot rose gracefully. "If we are to proceed, we must speak to each of these individuals. I would be grateful if you could arrange it." Sir Reginald agreed and rang for the porter. As they waited, Miss Marple turned slightly toward Poirot. "It is a small circle," she said quietly. "That usually means the truth is close at hand, but also well defended." Poirot smiled faintly. "You have much experience in these matters, Mademoiselle Marple." "I have much experience in watching people," she replied. "Villages and colleges are not so very different. Both are full of pride, gossip, and secrets nobody wishes to admit exist. Idesedzing and phrasing." The first to arrive was Clara Finch, the student who had discovered the body. She stood at the doorway, nervous and pale, her hands twisted together as if she were trying to keep them steady. "Please, come in, Mademoiselle Finch," Poirot said kindly. "We will not keep you long." She sat on the bed, edge of the chair, eyes fixed on her knees. "I do not know how I can help," she began. "I have already told the police everything." Poirot nodded. "Sometimes, mademoiselle, in repeating a story, the mind remembers a small detail it overlooked before. We will be gentle with your time." Miss Marple's voice, soft and reassuring, joined his. "You work in the library often, my dear?" she asked. "Yes," Clara replied. "Dr. Hargrave often asked me to help with cataloguing and transcription. He trusted my handwriting." "That is a very nice compliment," Miss Marple said. "Was he kind to, or you?" Clara hesitated. "He was demanding, but fair. He expected a lot. Sometimes he could be sharp, but only when the work mattered." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday, before the ceremony," he asked, "did you see Dr. Hargrave?" "Yes," Clara said. "In the afternoon. He seemed tense, more than usual. He asked me to fetch a set of notes from his office and leave them on his desk in the library. When I returned, he was not there. I left the notes and went to prepare for the evening. That was the last time I saw his work." "And when you came later," Poirot continued, "what did you intend to do in the library?" "I needed a reference book," she said, "for my thesis. I knew the ceremony would keep people away, so I thought the library would be quiet." "It was quiet," Miss Marple said softly. Clara swallowed. "Yes, too quiet. I called out his name when I saw someone on the floor. When he did not move, I ran for help." Poirot watched her closely. "Did you notice anything unusual?" he asked. "A smell, a sound, a door that should not have been open?" Clara frowned in thought. "The north window was open a little," she said slowly. "It is usually kept shut in the Croat, evenings. And one of the lamps was burning low, as if it had been lit for a long time. That is all I remember." Poirot exchanged a brief look with Miss Marple. "You have been most helpful, mademoiselle," he said. "You may go for now, but please remain available." Clara rose, thanked them softly, and left. When the door closed, Miss Marple folded her hands. "She is frightened," she said, "but not lying. It is the fear of someone who has stumbled accidentally into the middle of something dreadful." Poirot agreed. "Yes, the fear is genuine, and it tells us that she is not at the center of the plot, though she may have seen more than she realizes." The door opened again. This time, a tall man with sharp features and restless eyes entered. Dr. Leonard Shaw carried himself with the air of a man too busy to be patient, yet too aware of his position to show open disrespect. "You wanted to see me," he said briskly. Poirot motioned to the chair. "Please sit, Dr. Shaw. We are trying to understand the tragedy that has taken place." Shaw sat, but his posture remained tense. "I have already told the authorities," he said. "I had nothing to do with Hargrave's death." Cap to send to Roundy. Poirot did not respond directly. Instead, he asked, "You worked closely with the professor on the manuscript, did you not?" "Yes," Shaw replied. "For 3 years, we were preparing a major joint publication." Miss Marple looked at him with mild interest. "And were you in agreement about everything?" she asked. Shaw gave a short, humorless laugh. "Of course not," he said. "He treated me like an assistant, not a partner. He wanted full control of the final interpretation. I believed he was being overly cautious. The manuscript contains ideas that could reshape certain parts of our historical understanding. I wanted to move forward." Poirot picked up on a particular word. "You say he wanted control," Poirot said. "Did this lead to arguments?" Shaw's jaw tightened. "Yes, but academic arguments are not murder. I may have been angry, but I am not a criminal." "Where were you during the ceremony last night?" Poirot asked. "In the hall," Shaw replied. "Several colleagues saw me. I did not go near the library." Miss Marple watched him in silence. After a moment, she spoke gently. "You must have admired Dr. Hargrave once," she said. "You would not have chosen to work with him otherwise." Shaw blinked, taken off guard by the remark. "Yes," he admitted. "At first, he was a giant in the field, but giants cast long shadows. It is difficult to grow in them." Poirot nodded slowly. "Thank you, Dr. Shaw. For now, that is all." When he left, the room felt slightly lighter, but only slightly. Miss Marple turned to Poirot. "There is bitterness there," she said, "and hurt pride. Those things can be dangerous, but he seems too careful to act impulsively. If he is involved, it is not in a clumsy way." Poirot agreed. "He is a man who plans. If he has done something, it was thought through. We must see whether his alibi holds." Sir Reginald returned to announce that Edward Hargrave, the nephew, had arrived on short notice after hearing the news. Poirot nodded. "Good," he said. "Now we may hear from the family." Miss Marple looked thoughtful. "Family is often the most delicate part of these matters," she said. "People excuse much within families until they no longer can." Edward Hargrave entered the room with a mixture of confusion and unease. He was in his late 20s, dressed neatly but without the polish of the faculty members. His eyes were red, either from grief or lack of sleep. He greeted Sir Reginald awkwardly, then looked at Poirot and Miss Marple with uncertainty. Sir Reginald introduced them briefly. "These are here to assist," he said. "Mr. Poirot and Miss Marple will ask you a few questions. Edward, I would advise you to answer them honestly." Edward nodded and sat down, his shoulders slightly hunched. "I still cannot believe it," he said quietly. "My uncle was strict, but he was strong. It does not seem possible." Poirot observed him with gentle attention. "You were close to your uncle?" he asked. Edward hesitated. "In some ways, he raised me after my parents died, made sure I had an education, paid my fees, but we did not always agree." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "That can be quite natural," she said. "Gratitude and disagreement can live side by side." Edward gave a faint, sad smile. "Yes, he wanted me to follow a certain path, academia, discipline, a steady life. I tried, but I am not like him. I moved from one job to another. He called it irresponsibility. I called it searching." Poirot allowed a pause. "Did he continue to support you?" he asked. "For the most part," Edward replied, though recently he had grown impatient. "He said he could not keep rescuing me from my own choices. He talked of changing his will. I do not know if he actually did." Poirot's eyes sharpened slightly. "And this did not trouble you?" he asked. "Of course it did," Edward said, "but I am not heartless. He was my last close relative. I hoped we would make peace." Miss Marple spoke gently. "Were you here in Oxford yesterday?" she asked. Edward shook his head. "No. I arrived this morning as soon as I received the telegram. I was staying in London. You can confirm that if necessary." Poirot nodded slowly, filing the detail in his mind. "Did your uncle speak to you about the manuscript?" Poirot asked. "Only a little," Edward replied. "He said it was important. He believed it would be his final great work. He did not share the details, only that there were people who would be very interested in what it revealed." Miss Marple asked, "Did he ever mention feeling threatened?" Edward frowned. "Not directly," he said, "but he did say recently that when something is truly valuable, it attracts more than admiration. It attracts greed. I thought he meant professional jealousy." Poirot exchanged a thoughtful glance with Miss Marple. "You have helped us," Poirot said kindly. "For now, we will not trouble you further, but please do not leave Oxford without informing Sir Reginald." Edward nodded and left the room quietly. When the door closed, Miss Marple let out a soft breath. "How sad," she said. "There is love and strain both in that young man. If there was any talk of a will, gossip will surely follow." Poirot agreed. "Money, pride, ambition, reputation, all present in this small circle. It is a rich field for motives." And fine Solday. Sir Reginald looked troubled. "I cannot bear the thought that one of my staff might be responsible," he said. Poirot was understanding but firm. "It is often in respectable places that such things are hardest to accept," he said, "but we must face the truth, wherever it leads." Miss Marple added quietly, "Protecting the truth is also a kind of loyalty to your college, Sir Reginald. Secrets fester. Truth, once faced, can be mended." There was a soft knock, and the college librarian, Mr. Howard Pierce, appeared at the doorway. He was a thin man with a careful expression and a voice that always seemed on the edge of a whisper. "Sir Reginald," he said, "I heard you wished to speak with me about the library." Poirot stood. "Indeed, Mr. Pierce," he said, "please join us." The librarian sat, his hands folded in his lap. "You manage the keys to the library?" Poirot asked. "Yes," Pierce replied. "I keep the main set. Certain staff members have access, including Dr. Hargrave and Dr. Shaw. On special days, a key is also given to the porter." Poirot recalled the key ring on the desk and the missing key. "Were any keys missing last night?" he asked. Pierce looked uncomfortable. "One of the inner cabinet keys is not in its place this morning," he said slowly. "The one used for the manuscript display case." Miss Marple leaned forward slightly. "And who had that key last?" she asked. "Dr. Hargrave," Pierce answered. "I gave it to him yesterday morning. He said he would return it after the ceremony. He never did." Poirot considered this. "Could anyone else have taken another copy?" he asked. "No," Pierce replied. "There is only one such key, unless someone had a copy made." Miss Marple's voice remained gentle. "You must know the habits of the library better than anyone," she said. "Did you notice anything strange these past days?" Pierce hesitated for a long moment. "I am not sure if it matters," he said slowly, "but I did see Dr. Shaw and Dr. Hargrave arguing in hushed voices near the catalogues 2 nights ago, and yesterday, shortly before noon, I saw a stranger in the corridor near the north entrance. I assumed he was a visitor or one of the guests for the ceremony, but I did not recognize him." Poirot's attention sharpened. "A stranger?" he asked. "Can you describe him?" "Medium height," Pierce said. "Dark coat, hat pulled low. He walked quickly and did not look at me. There was something hurried in his manner. I intended to ask the porter later if new guests had arrived, but I forgot." Miss Marple's eyes grew thoughtful. "An unknown element often means more complexity," she said, "but sometimes it is introduced on purpose so that people look outward instead of inward." Poirot smiled at that. "Very true, mademoiselle," he said, "but we must consider all possibilities. A stranger near the library on the day of a valuable manuscript and a murder is not a trivial detail." Pierce shifted uneasily. "I hope I have been of some help," he said. "You have," Poirot replied politely. "You must make a list of everyone who signed the library ledger yesterday, if you please." Pierce nodded and left to do so. Sir Reginald looked at Poirot and Miss Marple with a mixture of worry and hope. "Do you believe the truth can be found quickly?" he asked. Poirot shook his head gently. "I believe," he said, "that the truth is already present. It lies in these small details: a missing key, a tense argument, a nephew worried about a will, a student who notices an open window, a stranger in Doik, the corridor." Miss Marple added softly, "and in the hearts of people who have not yet decided how much they are willing to admit." Poirot looked out toward the courtyard, where a few students walked with hunched shoulders, whispering to each other. "Oxford," he said quietly, "is a place of learning. It seems we, too, have much to learn here." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "And I suspect," she said, "that some of the most important lessons will be about human nature, not manuscripts." Outside, the college bell rang the hour. Inside, two quiet minds continued to shape the invisible threads that would, in time, reveal the pattern behind the crime. Chapter 3. The Missing Manuscript. Morning sunlight filtered through tall library windows as Poirot stepped inside once again. The staff had closed the room for investigation, and dust sheets now covered the tables. Miss Marple followed quietly behind him, her eyes traveling across shelves, corners, and shadows with gentle curiosity. The smell of old paper lingered as if waiting to share its secrets. Poirot moved to the manuscript display case. Its glass top reflected the light in a pale shimmer. The lock hung, open, and the velvet lining inside was empty. It looked almost lonely without the treasured manuscript resting in its place. Miss Marple stood beside him. "It seems strange," she said softly, "that someone would commit a murder here and also steal a manuscript of such value. Both acts require courage or desperation." Poirot nodded. "Or planning," he added. "Let us not forget that these halls are full of minds trained to build arguments and constructs with great care." He knelt slightly and examined the lock. "Not forced," he said. "This required the key." Miss Marple folded her hands, and the key was last with Dr. Hargrave. Poirot straightened. "So, it appears. But we do not yet know whether he kept it on his person, placed it on the desk, or entrusted it to someone. We must speak to those who saw him last." Miss Marple stepped closer to the large oak table near the center of the room. Several reference books lay in neat stacks. Only one volume sat slightly out of place. She touched the spine gently. "Latin," she said, "a very old edition." Poirot walked over. "Yes, and look here, mademoiselle. Something has been pressed between the pages." He opened the book carefully to reveal a narrow piece of parchment. It looked like it had been torn from a larger sheet. Letters in faded ink ran along one edge, but they were incomplete. Miss Marple studied it with interest. "Perhaps the professor placed it here," she said, "or perhaps the thief did not wish to be seen carrying something too large." Poirot nodded. "A clever mind might hide a clue in plain sight, but not perfectly." He placed the parchment in an envelope for safe keeping. "Let us see what else this room can tell us." They walked slowly toward the northern side of the library, where tall windows overlooked the courtyard. The window Clara Finch mentioned was indeed slightly ajar. Poirot examined the latch. "It is not broken," he said. "Someone opened this deliberately." Miss Marple looked at the stone path outside the window. "Could someone have entered from here?" she asked. Poirot shook his head. "It is quite high above the ground, but someone might have used it to pass something outward or to signal someone." Miss Marple agreed. Or perhaps someone needed air, she said. People often forget the simplest explanations. Poirot smiled gently. This is why you are a valuable observer, Mademoiselle Marple. You see what is human, not merely what is logical. She gave a modest smile. I simply remember what I have seen in ordinary places. Human beings do not change much between villages and universities. Poirot walked back toward the body's former location. A faint outline on the carpet showed where the professor had lain. On either side of the mark were small, scattered flecks of dust. Poirot crouched to inspect them. This dust, he murmured, is not from the carpet. It is too fine, perhaps from old parchment or stone. Miss Marple looked at the surrounding shelves. The medieval section, she said. Many of those books have not been opened in years. They would release dust like that if handled roughly. Poirot stood. Let us look more closely. They moved to the far aisle where tall shelves held manuscripts and reference works. Poirot brushed his fingertips across one shelf and frowned. Dust disturbed here, he said. Several volumes moved recently. Miss Marple leaned closer. And one gap, she said quietly. Poirot nodded. Yes, a missing volume. It may have been taken with the manuscript. He checked the catalogue card nearby. The missing book was listed as a historical commentary on the same manuscript that had disappeared. It seems our thief is knowledgeable, Poirot said. This was no random theft. Miss Marple glanced at the door. Knowledgeable, she murmured. Which limits our suspects, though it does not necessarily narrow their motives. They left the library and headed down the corridor where the librarian, Mr. Pierce, was waiting with the ledger. I have compiled yesterday's entries, he said, handing Poirot the book. These are the names of those who accessed the library. Poirot opened it. Dr. Hargrave, Clara Finch, Dr. Shaw, 2 undergraduate students, the librarian himself, and an unfamiliar name. Miss Marple pointed to it gently. Who is Thomas Greer? She asked. Mr. Pierce looked uncertain. I do not know, he said. I assumed he was one of 20T, the guests who had come for the ceremony. Poirot studied the name. Perhaps the stranger you saw was this Mr. Greer. Pierce frowned. Perhaps, but the visitor's book at the gatehouse shows no one with that name arriving. Miss Marple's eyes grew thoughtful. Then either he entered without official registration, she said, or he gave a false name. Poirot closed the ledger. In either case, we must find him. Mr. Pierce hesitated, then cleared his throat. There is more, he said. Last night, after the ceremony began, I returned to the library briefly to fetch a set of keys. I heard someone speaking, a quiet voice. When I stepped inside, no one was visible. I assumed it was my imagination. Poirot looked sharply at him. Do you recall what was said? Poirot asked. Only a few words, Pierce replied. Something like, not yet, or wait. I cannot be certain. Number 4. Miss Marple's expression softened with concern. Fear can make people misremember, she said gently, but it can also make them overlook something important. Poirot nodded. This detail may matter later. He turned to Miss Marple. I suggest we speak with Dr. Shaw again, and also with Miss Clara Finch. They may recognize the name Thomas Greer. Miss Marple agreed. People rarely appear without leaving some echo, she said. Even strangers leave traces. Together, they walked down the long corridor toward the senior common room, where faculty often gathered. The wooden floors creaked under their steps. The whisper of distant voices drifted through the hall, steady yet anxious. Miss Marple spoke softly. It feels as if the college itself is holding its breath, she said. Poirot nodded. A place of learning is often a place of quiet tension, but tension can tell us much. We follow it where it leads. They entered the common room. A few lecturers sat in small groups, whispering among themselves. Dr. Shaw noticed them and turned away, pretending to be absorbed in a document. Clara Finch stood alone near the window, looking lost. Poirot moved to Clara. Mademoiselle, he said kindly, we discovered the name Thomas Greer in the library ledger. Does the name mean anything to you? Clara shook her head. No, she said. I have never heard it. Poirot nodded. Very well. And Dr. Shaw? Shaw looked annoyed but approached. Greer? He said, frowning. No idea. Sounds like a visitor. The college was full of them yesterday. Poirot studied him carefully. You are certain? Poirot asked. Yes, Shaw replied firmly. I am certain. Miss Marple stepped closer. You seem very sure, she said gently. Sometimes a name sounds familiar. Only later. Shaw gave a tense smile. If I recall anything, I will inform you. Poirot thanked him and stepped away. When they were out of earshot, Miss Marple whispered softly, That young man is hiding something. Not necessarily guilt, but something. Poirot nodded. Agreed. There is tension in him. A man who wants the truth hidden, but for reasons yet unknown. Miss Marple looked toward the corridor. And the stranger, she said. His role must soon come into light. Poirot replied quietly. Yes. The manuscript, the missing book, the open window, the false name, the pattern grows clearer, but not complete. They headed toward the principal's office again. Miss Marple's voice was soft but steady. The manuscript, she said, seems to be the center of everything, but human emotion still sits in the shadows. Pride, jealousy, loyalty, fear. Poirot smiled, gently. And where there is human emotion, the truth will come. As Poirot and Miss Marple walked through the quiet college corridors, the sense of unease grew thicker. The ancient stone walls seemed to hold memories of the past, and now they held the weight of a present mystery as well. When they reached Sir Reginald's office, he was already inside, reading through letters spread across his desk. He rose when they entered. Any progress? He asked anxiously. Poirot sat calmly. Progress? Yes, he replied. Answers? Not yet, but we are moving toward them. Miss Marple stood beside the window, gazing out across the courtyard. There is a heaviness over the college, she said gently. People know something is wrong, but they do not know how to face it. Sir Reginald sighed. This institution has stood for centuries, he said. We have survived wars, political storms, even fires. But scandal is still the most feared threat. Poirot nodded sympathetically. It is understandable. Reputation is the lifeblood of a place such as this, but truth must come before pride. Sir Reginald sat behind his desk. Tell me what you have discovered so far. Poirot placed the ledger on the desk. There is a name here, he said. Thomas Greer. It does not appear in visitor records. Sir Reginald frowned. Greer? No one by that name was invited. Miss Marple spoke gently. Then either he entered without permission, or someone used a false name to disguise their emesitate presence. Sir Reginald looked worried. Do you believe an outsider could be responsible? Poirot considered this before answering. It is possible, but the theft of the manuscript required specific knowledge, and the murder required precise timing. This suggests someone familiar with the routines here, Miss Marple added softly. Someone who knows when the library would be empty. Someone who knew about the ceremony. Poirot leaned forward. Sir Reginald, we must ask you a delicate question. Did Dr. Hargrave ever confide in you about threats, professional or personal? The principal hesitated. Not directly, he said slowly, but he did mention last month that he was concerned about certain interpretations of the manuscript. He believed some scholars would go to great lengths to control its release. Poirot exchanged a look with Miss Marple. Was Dr. Shaw among these scholars? Poirot asked. Sir Reginald looked uncomfortable. Yes, he said. Leonard is brilliant, but he is also impatient. He believes in bold progress, not caution. He and Dr. Hargrave disagreed often. Miss Marple asked, Did anyone else have interest in the manuscript? Sir Reginald rubbed his forehead. There was an external researcher, he said, a man from the London Historical Society who contacted Dr. Hargrave privately. I do not know his name. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Could this man be Thomas Greer? It is possible, Sir Reginald admitted. Dr. Hargrave did not share many details. Poirot sat back. The picture becomes more complex, but we must not overlook simple truths. Let us consider the timeline. Dr. Hargrave was last seen alive in the afternoon. The manuscript was removed before or shortly after his death. The killer gained access with the key, Miss Marple added gently, and someone opened the window, perhaps not to escape, but to create the impression of escape. Poirot nodded. A false trail, possibly, or a signal between the murderer and an accomplice. Sir Reginald's face tightened. I cannot believe such corruption could be present here. Miss Marple gave him a sympathetic look. In every quiet place, she said softly, there are secrets. People carry them like shadows. Just then, the porter knocked and entered. Sir Reginald, he said, police have located a man matching the description given by Mr. Pierce. He was seen at a nearby inn, a Mr. Greer. Poirot stood at once. Excellent, he said. We must speak with him immediately. Miss Marple smiled gently. Sometimes, she said, clues appear when one stops searching for them. Sir Reginald arranged for a carriage. Within minutes, Poirot and Miss Marple were on their way through the narrow streets of Oxford. The carriage wheels rattled over cobblestones as they made their way past bookshops, cafes, and college gates. Miss Marple looked out the window with thoughtful calm. I wonder, she said softly, whether this Mr. Greer is a thief, a spy, or simply a frightened man caught in something larger than himself. Poirot answered with a small smile. All possibilities remain open, but we must question him with care. They soon arrived at the small inn, a quiet place with wooden beams and a warm glow from the hearth. The innkeeper greeted them nervously. Mr. Greer is in the back room, he whispered. He has been restless since last night. Poirot nodded. Thank you. We will speak with him. The back room was dimly lit, with only a small lamp placed on a wooden table. A man sat with his head in his hands. When he looked up at them, his expression was one of deep worry rather than guilt. Poirot approached him gently. Mr. Greer? He asked. The man nodded shakily. I am Thomas Greer, he said. I suppose you are here about the professor. Miss Marple stepped forward. You were at the college yesterday, she said softly. It would help us to understand your reason. Greer swallowed hard. I came to see Dr. Hargrave, he said. I hoped he would speak to me, but he refused. I was desperate. I had no intention of causing harm. Poirot studied him closely. Why were you desperate? Poirot asked. Greer rubbed his forehead. Because the manuscript contains a reference that could change everything for my family. An ancestor of mine was involved in a dispute centuries ago. I believed the manuscript would prove that he was wrongly accused. Miss Marple's eyes softened. You hoped for vindication, she said. Yes, Greer said. It has haunted my family for generations. Poirot nodded slowly. Did you steal the manuscript? Poirot asked directly. Greer shook his head vigorously. No, I swear I did not. I only wanted to see it. Dr. Hargrave refused me. He said he could not release anything until after the full study was complete. Miss Marple asked softly, Were you in the library last night? Greer looked shocked. No, I left the college after the professor refused to help me. I walked around Oxford until late evening, then came here. You can ask the innkeeper. I was here before the ceremony even began. Poirot exchanged a look with Miss Marple. Do you know Dr. Shaw? Poirot asked. Greer frowned. I met him briefly last year. He was polite, but dismissive. He did not think my story had any scholarly value. Poirot considered this. And the missing manuscript? Poirot asked. Do you know who may have wanted it? Greer hesitated. I heard rumors, he said. Someone wanted to publish their own interpretation before Dr. Hargrave finished his. A race for recognition, perhaps. Miss Marple sighed softly. Ambition can be a dangerous thing, she said. Poirot stood. Mr. Greer, he said gently, for now, we believe you are not the culprit, but you must remain available for further questions. Greer nodded gratefully. Thank you, he said. I only want the truth. As Poirot and Miss Marple left the inn, the evening light cast long shadows across the streets. Miss Marple spoke quietly. "He is not our murderer," she said. Poirot agreed. "No, he is only a man seeking justice for the past." They stepped into the carriage. "But the present," Poirot said, "demands we look again at those inside the college." The circle closes. Tighter. Miss Marple folded her hands. "And soon," she said, "the person who stole the manuscript will no longer be able to hide in the shadows." The carriage rolled onward, carrying them back towards Street Aldwyn College, where the truth waited behind old doors and guarded faces. Chapter 4. The Torn Page Clue. The sky over Oxford turned a soft grey as Poirot and Miss Marple returned to Street Aldwyn College. Clouds drifted low over the spires, and a light breeze rustled the fallen leaves across the courtyard. The college seemed quieter than ever, as though the stones themselves were waiting for answers. Sir Reginald met them at the entrance. His face was pale, and he looked as though he had aged in the last few hours. "Have you learned anything?" he asked anxiously. Poirot offered a calm smile. "We have learned enough to continue with confidence," he said, "but there is more to uncover, and we must be allowed full access to the archive room." Sir Reginald nodded quickly. "Of course, I will take you myself." The archive room was hidden beneath one of the older wings of the college. Down a narrow staircase they went, the walls dimly lit by small iron lamps. At the bottom stood a heavy oak door bound with metal hinges. Sir Reginald unlocked it, and the door creaked open. Inside, rows of shelves held manuscripts, catalogues, parchments, letters, and historical documents. Dust hung in the air with a faint smell of age and ink. Miss Marple entered with quiet reverence, her eyes roaming across the stacks as though she were stepping into a church. Poirot walked directly to the back of the room. There sat an old wooden desk, covered with papers. Several folders lay open, and a few loose pages were scattered as if someone had searched through them in haste. "Did Dr. Hargrave work here often?" Poirot asked. Sir Reginald nodded. "Yes, he spent most mornings here. This is where he prepared his notes for the manuscript study." Poirot examined the desk. He found a series of handwritten notes, carefully dated. Several entries described interpretations of specific symbols found in the medieval manuscript. Poirot read silently. Miss Marple approached a stack of bound journals. She opened one gently. Inside were sketches of the manuscript's illustrations. Each symbol had been drawn and labelled, some with annotations. "These look important," she said softly. "Detailed work. I imagine he guarded them closely." Sir Reginald sighed. "He did. That is why this theft troubles me so deeply. Only a handful of scholars could understand the manuscript well enough to make use of it." Poirot picked up a loose sheet that lay partly hidden beneath a notebook. It appeared to be a translation of a passage from the manuscript, but part of it was missing. The lower right corner had been torn away. Poirot and Miss Marple exchanged a look. "Another torn piece," Miss Marple said, "like the one we found in the library." "Yes," Poirot agreed, "and this tear seems to match in style. It appears someone removed a section deliberately." He turned to Sir Reginald. "Has anyone else been allowed in here since Dr. Hargrave's death?" "No," Sir Reginald said. "Only Pierce and myself have keys." Poirot thought about this carefully. "And who had access before yesterday?" "Dr. Shaw," Sir Reginald replied reluctantly. "Clara Finch, occasionally. And the Professor's nephew, Edward, though rarely. He did not understand the material." Poirot walked slowly toward the far shelf. Something had caught his eye. A faint smear of dark dust ran across the edge of one lower shelf. "Curious," he murmured. "This matches the dust we saw in the library." Miss Marple leaned closer. "It looks like something heavy was pulled out," she said. Poirot nodded. "Possibly a book or a case, perhaps even the manuscript box, before it was taken upstairs." He turned the thought in his mind. If the thief had come to the archives first, taken something, and then gone to the library, the timeline might become clearer. Sir Reginald looked troubled. "Are you suggesting someone removed the manuscript earlier in the day?" "No." Poirot shook his head. "Not necessarily the manuscript itself, But perhaps someone retrieved the commentary volume that was missing. The earlier clues made me suspect it had significance. The torn pages here suggest the thief wanted very specific information. Miss Marple looked around the room, thoughtfully. "It does not seem like the work of someone rash," she said. "Someone walked in here with purpose." Poirot agreed. Someone who knew exactly which volume to take and exactly what page to remove. They studied the shelves for another half-hour. Poirot reconstructed the likely order of events, while Miss Marple observed the subtle habits of the room marks on the floor, the way certain folders leaned, the dust disturbed on certain spines. Every inch of the archive had a story to tell to those patient enough to listen. Poirot eventually found a locked drawer in the desk. "Sir, Reginald," Poirot asked, "do you have a key for this?" Sir Reginald searched his pocket and produced a small brass key. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside were several letters tied neatly with ribbon. Dr. Hargrave's handwriting appeared on the outside of each envelope. Miss Marple untied the first bundle gently. The top letter was addressed to an unknown recipient. Poirot read aloud, "To whom it may concern. Should anything happen to me, know that the manuscript holds truths that may unsettle certain scholars. I have grown suspicious that someone wishes to distort it for their own gain." He set the letter down. Miss Marple lifted another. This one read, "There is a danger in allowing ambition to run unchecked. Someone is growing impatient. I fear they may attempt to move ahead without proper study." Sir Reginald's face turned ashen. I had no idea he felt. "Threatened," he whispered. Poirot picked up the third letter. "And here," Poirot said, "the professor names no individual, but speaks of a hint, an overheard conversation perhaps." Miss Marple said softly, "These letters must have frightened him deeply." Poirot walked to the desk and examined. The torn page again. Complex symbols and Latin phrases danced across the parchment, but the missing corner held what looked like a key annotation. "A symbol meaning inheritance," Poirot murmured, "or lineage." Miss Marple looked toward the empty space in the tear. "And the missing section?" she asked. Poirot nodded. "Possibly the part that would link the manuscript to someone living." Miss Marple's voice remained steady. "Someone like the nephew," she said, "or someone like Mr. Greer." Poirot considered this. "Yes," he said, "but the nephew did not know enough to interpret the text, and Mr. Greer would not benefit from the professor's death. Someone else, however, might use such a secret for influence or prestige." Miss Marple folded her hands gently. "It always returns to human motives," she said. "Ambition, reputation, fear of being overlooked." Poirot smiled slightly. "And jealousy," he added, "which is often the quietest but most dangerous motive." They searched the drawer again. At the bottom lay a single slip of paper. On it was a name. Poirot lifted it slowly. It read, "L. Shaw, questionable intentions." Miss Marple sighed softly. "Poor man," she said. "His ambition has placed him in a very dark corner." Poirot closed the drawer gently. "That does not make him the murderer," Poirot said, "but it brings us closer to the truth." Miss Marple agreed. "The pieces are gathering," she said, "but still not connected." Poirot nodded. "Yes, we must uncover what the torn page reveals and why someone feared its contents so deeply." When Poirot and Miss Marple returned from the archive room, they found the college hall buzzing with soft but uneasy energy. Students clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Several glanced at the investigators as they passed, their expressions a mix of curiosity and nervousness. Miss Marple gave them a small, encouraging smile. "Fear grows easily in young hearts," she said softly to Poirot. Poirot nodded. "Fear and imagination walk closely together," he replied, "especially in a place where knowledge is prized." They made their way to the senior common room. Dr. Leonard Shaw was seated alone at a table near the fireplace, reading through a stack of papers. His brow was furrowed, and his foot tapped impatiently beneath the table. Poirot approached calmly. "Dr. Shaw," he said, "may we have a moment?" Shaw looked up, irritation flickering across his features before he masked it. "Of course," he said, "though I fear I have nothing new to offer." Poirot and Miss Marple took seats opposite him. Poirot began quietly. "You knew Dr. Hargrave very well. You worked beside him daily. You understood the manuscript's complexities as few others did." Shaw nodded cautiously. "Yes," Miss Marple spoke gently. "And you knew his fears." Shaw looked surprised. "His fears?" Poirot placed the torn translation page on the table. "We know the professor believed someone wished to distort the manuscript's findings. Someone impatient, someone ambitious." Shaw's jaw tightened. "Are you implying I harmed him?" he asked sharply. Poirot lifted a hand. "I imply nothing without evidence, but I ask questions." Shaw exhaled heavily. "I did not kill him," he said. "I was in the hall during the ceremony. Many people saw me." Poirot nodded. "Perhaps, but you had earlier access to the archives, and perhaps to the key." Shaw stood abruptly. "This is absurd." Miss Marple spoke quietly. "Please sit, Dr. Shaw. Sometimes people do regrettable things when they believe their work will be overshadowed." Shaw hesitated, then sat again. "I will tell you the truth," he said. "I did argue with him. I felt he was holding back important discoveries because they did not fit the traditional interpretation. The manuscript contains references that challenge long-held assumptions. He was afraid of controversy. I was not." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "So you wished to publish first?" Shaw's eyes flickered with something like pain. "I wish to be recognized," he said quietly. "I have worked for years with little credit," he promised. Joint authorship, but he remained the primary name. "I wanted my own voice." Poirot watched him carefully. "And the torn page?" Poirot asked. Shaw's confusion appeared genuine. "What torn page?" Poirot placed the second torn sheet from the archive on the table. Shaw stared at it blankly. "This is not mine," he said. "I have never seen it." Poirot believed him. Miss Marple's gentle voice followed. "Dr. Shaw, did Dr. Hargrave ever mention Thomas Greer?" Shaw looked puzzled. "No," he said. "Who is that?" Poirot and Miss Marple exchanged a glance. Shaw's reaction had been too honest to fake. Poirot changed direction. "Tell us about the nephew," Poirot said. "Edward. How was his relationship with the professor?" Shaw hesitated. "Edward visited often," he said slowly. "He relied on his uncle financially, but he had no interest in the manuscript. He found it dull. He said so openly." Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. "And the library window?" she asked. "Would anyone know how to open it without drawing attention?" Shaw frowned. "It sticks," he said. "I have had trouble with it, but Pierce, the librarian, knows how to manage it. He opens it sometimes for ventilation." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Interesting." Miss Marple saw the implication immediately. "Do you suspect the librarian?" she asked softly. Poirot did not answer directly. "I suspect that he knows more about the movements in the library than he has admitted." Shaw rubbed his forehead. "I cannot imagine Pierce harming anyone," he said. "He is timid, always afraid of offending someone." Poirot shrugged gently. "Timidity does not rule out desperation," Miss Marple added, "or fear." Shaw looked troubled. "Are you saying he might have stolen the manuscript?" Poirot stood slowly. "I say only that everyone in this college had pressure upon them, and pressure reveals weakness." Shaw looked down at his papers, his expression weary. "I just want this to be over," he said quietly. Poirot nodded politely and left him. Miss Marple followed, her steps light and thoughtful. When they reached the corridor, she said softly, "He is not lying. His pride is wounded, but he is not hiding murder." Poirot agreed. "Yes, but others still hide much." They walked toward the library again. As they neared the entrance, they heard hurried footsteps inside. Poirot raised a hand, indicating silence. They stepped inside quietly. The room appeared empty at first. Then Miss Marple noticed a shadow moving behind one of the tall shelves. She pointed gently. Poirot approached with careful steps. "Who is there?" he called calmly. A figure stepped out. It was Mr. Pierce, the librarian. His face was pale and his hands trembled. "I was looking for a book," he stammered. Poirot studied him closely. "At this hour? In this state of mind?" Pierce swallowed. "I could not sleep," he said. "I thought perhaps I had missed something." Miss Marple's voice was calm and reassuring. "It must be frightening for you," she said gently, "being so close to the place where it happened." Pierce nodded shakily. "Yes, I hear sounds in here. Last night I thought I heard someone whispering." Poirot stepped closer. "You did hear someone?" he said softly. "You mentioned it earlier." Pierce looked down. "I did not want to believe it," he whispered. "I thought perhaps it was my imagination." Poirot placed a hand lightly on the shelf. "Tell me, Mr. Pierce," he said, "when you came in last night, did you see a person or only hear them?" Pierce hesitated. "I saw only a shadow. I thought it was Dr. Shaw at first because of the coat, but when I stepped closer, the figure disappeared behind the stacks." Miss Marple asked softly, "And the coat, what color was it?" Pierce blinked. "Dark grey," he said, "like the professor's nephew wore this morning." Poirot and Miss Marple exchanged a sharp look. Pierce continued, voice trembling. "But the height was different." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Different how?" Pierce gestured uncertainly. "Taller," he said. "More slender. Not Edward, not Shaw either. Someone else." Miss Marple folded her hands. "A third presence," she said gently. "Someone who moved quietly and did not wish to be seen." Pierce nodded. "I know it sounds strange, but when I entered, I thought I saw the shadow of someone leaning over the professor's desk." Poirot stepped back. "And now," he said quietly, "we know the truth. Someone returned after the murder." Miss Marple agreed, and perhaps looked for something they had not found earlier. Pierce's trembling increased. "What if they come back again?" he whispered. Poirot spoke with calm certainty. "They will," he said, "for a murderer always returns to the scene when something remains unfinished." Miss Marple nodded gently. "And we will be ready." Chapter 5. The past returns. The afternoon light over Oxford had turned flat and colourless. Low clouds pressed down on the ancient buildings, giving the college a quiet, subdued air. In the courtyard of Street Aldwyn, students walked more slowly than usual, their conversations short and guarded. Rumours moved faster than people. Miss Marple and Amelia Carter sat together in a small tea room just outside the college gates. The room smelled of warm bread and strong tea. A few other customers sat scattered at tables, speaking in murmurs. Amelia watched Miss Marple stir her tea with a thoughtful frown. "You have that look, Jane," she said. "The one you get when you are thinking very hard about something that seems small to everyone else." Miss Marple smiled gently. "Small things often lead to very large conclusions," she said. "This manuscript, this murder, this quiet college, they are all tied to people, and people are very rarely simple." Amelia sighed. "Everyone is talking about it," she said. "Some blame the students, some the ambitious, young doctors, and a few have already decided it must be an outsider." Miss Marple looked out the window. "Yes," she said. "Blaming those outside is always more comfortable than looking within." Amelia hesitated, then spoke in a lower voice. "There is something I should tell you," she said. "Something from years ago. It may be nothing, but it has been on my mind since you arrived." Miss Marple turned her full attention to her friend. "Go on, Amelia," she said quietly. "About 20 years ago," Amelia began, "there was a scandal here. Not a loud one, but whispered. A student accused another of stealing his work. There was a manuscript involved then as well, though not as ancient as this one. The matter was quieted. The accused student left in disgrace." Miss Marple listened carefully. "And the one who accused him?" she asked. "He went on to an academic career," Amelia said. "People spoke of his integrity at the time. They said he valued truth over friendship." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed in thought. "What were their names?" she asked. Amelia hesitated. "The student who left was named Greer," she said. "Arthur Greer. The one who stayed became a respected scholar. His name was Malcolm Hargrave. Miss Marple sat very still. So Dr. Hargrave had already been involved in a controversy over authorship, she said, and the name Greer returns, like an echo, years later. Amelia looked uneasy. I do not suggest his guilt, she said quickly. He may have been perfectly right, but it is strange that the name appears again. Miss Marple considered this. Families remember such things, she said. Grievances do not vanish simply because time passes. It explains why Thomas Greer spoke of a long-standing injustice. It may not be only legend in his mind. Amelia folded her hands around her teacup. Do you think he might have come seeking revenge? She asked. I think, Miss Marple replied softly, that he came seeking proof. Revenge is something else, and I did not see it in his eyes. They left the tea room and walked slowly back toward the college. Inside the gates, they met Poirot coming down the steps. He joined them with a small bow. Mademoiselle Marple, he said, I was just about to look for you. There is something I wish to discuss. Miss Marple smiled. And there is something I must tell you, she replied. They found a quiet bench in the courtyard, away from students. Amelia excused herself and went home, promising to return if needed. Poirot turned to Miss Marple. I have been thinking about the letters in the archive, he said. The professor feared someone would twist the manuscript's eye, meaning he spoke of ambition growing dangerous. Miss Marple nodded. And I have been thinking of something older, she said. A scandal from 20 years ago involving a student named Greer and a rising scholar named Hargrave. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Ah, he said, so the past steps onto the stage. She told him the story as Amelia had related it. Poirot listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. So the young Hargrave once accused a fellow student of theft, he said at last, and the accused left in disgrace. This creates an interesting background for the current events. Miss Marple agreed. Thomas Greer may not simply be a stranger with a family story, she said. He may be the heir of a very real injustice, or at least of something that many people chose not to question at the time. Poirot considered this. The professor's fear, then, he said, may have been not only of ambitious colleagues, but also of old sins returning. Miss Marple folded her hands. Old sins, she said softly, have a way of visiting new generations. Poirot rose. We must speak with Mr. Greer again, he said, and also with someone who knew the college well in those days, a long-serving porter or a retired fellow. Miss Marple nodded. And we must not forget another fact, she added. The manuscript contains references to lineage, inheritance, names. If the text can clear or condemn a family, then motive extends beyond scholarly pride. Poirot smiled faintly. You think like a criminologist, mademoiselle, he said. She answered with a gentle smile. No, I think like a person who has lived in a village where everyone knows everything and yet admits very little. They went to see Sir Reginald again. He looked more worn than before, but he received them promptly. Sir Reginald, Poirot began. 20 years ago there was an incident involving a student named Greer and Dr. Hargrave. We require the official record, if it still exists. Sir Reginald looked startled. You know of that? He asked. I had almost forgotten. It was a painful affair at the time. Miss Marple said softly. It seems it may have planted seeds that have only now come to bloom. Sir Reginald sighed. I believe the disciplinary records are kept in a locked cupboard near the old bursar's office, he said. I will have them brought. As they waited, Miss Marple looked around the office. On the wall hung portraits of past principals, their expressions solemn. This college, she said quietly, has a habit of preserving images of its leaders. I wonder if it is as careful with its mistakes. When the records arrived, Poirot opened the file marked with the year of the scandal. He found the entry. The report was brief and formal. Arthur Greer was accused of plagiarizing a section of work from his classmate, Malcolm Hargrave. Evidence was presented. Greer denied the accusation, but the testimony of Hargrave and another witness persuaded the committee. Greer withdrew from the college. Miss Marple read the final line aloud. Case resolved, matter closed. Poirot tapped the page lightly. Matters like this are never truly closed, he said. They live on in memory and in the quiet bitterness of families. Sir Reginald looked distressed. Are you suggesting the present crime is revenge for that old case? He asked. Miss Marple shook her head gently. No, she said. I am suggesting that it may be one thread among several, but we must learn who the other witness was. Poirot looked back at the page. Here, he said. The name is smudged, but legible. H. Pierce. Sir Reginald blinked. The librarian? He said in disbelief. Howard Pierce has been here that long. Poirot gently closed the file. Yes, he said, and it appears he has known more of the college's secrets than we realized. Miss Marple's voice was soft but steady. Then the past is not simply returning, she said. It has been sitting quietly in the library for years. The late afternoon shadows stretched long across the college corridors as Poirot and Miss Marple walked toward the library once more. Their footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a bell marked the change of the hour. Miss Marple spoke gently. It is not easy, she said, for someone to carry the weight of a lie for many years. Whether it was true or false, Mr. Pierce has lived with that old testimony for a long time. Poirot nodded. It is time we ask him about it, he replied. The truth now may reveal the truth then. They found the librarian in his small office behind the main desk. The room was cramped and lined with catalogues, labels, ink bottles, and carefully stacked papers. Pierce sat hunched over a ledger, his thin shoulders slightly curved. He looked up with a start when they entered. Oh, he said, adjusting his spectacles. It is you. Have you discovered anything more? Poirot closed the door gently behind them. We have discovered something older, he said. Something from 20 years ago. Pierce's hand froze above the page. Old matters have no bearing on this, he said quickly. Miss Marple's voice was kind and quiet. On the contrary, she said, old matters often have a great deal of bearing, especially when they were not settled cleanly. Pierce swallowed. I do not know what you mean, he murmured. Poirot placed the disciplinary file on the small desk. Arthur Greer, he said simply. Pierce's face lost colour. You found the record, he whispered. Yes, Poirot replied, and we found your name upon it as a witness to that Paris pride is really for Cretin Jange. Pierce pressed his lips together. I did what was required of me at the time, he said. I was younger. I followed instructions. Miss Marple tilted her head slightly. Whose instructions? She asked. Pierce hesitated for a long moment. Dr. Hargrave's, he said at last. He brought the matter to the committee. He asked me to confirm that certain notes belonged to him and not to Greer. I did so. Poirot watched him carefully. Did you lie? Poirot asked. Pierce's hands trembled. I convinced myself I was telling the truth, he said. Hargrave was respected. Greer was troubled, often late with work. When Hargrave showed me the pages, he said Greer had copied him. I believed him. Or perhaps I wanted to believe him because it was easier. Miss Marple's eyes were full of quiet understanding. Easier to side with the strong, she said softly, than to risk one's position by doubting them. Pierce nodded miserably. Later, he said, I learned that Greer had his own notes, written earlier. Someone showed me a date. It suggested that perhaps the ideas were his first. I never told anyone. The case had already been decided. I was afraid of the trouble it would cause if I reopened it. Poirot folded his arms. So an innocent man may have been cast out, he said. I do not know for certain, Pierce replied, but I have never stopped thinking about it. And when I saw Thomas Greer's name in the ledger yesterday, my heart nearly stopped. Miss Marple spoke gently. You have carried this worry for 20 years, she said. That must have weighed on you. Pierce nodded. Do you think he knows? He asked quietly. About my part in it? Poirot answered calmly. He knows that his family suffered. Whether he knows details, I cannot say. But it is not your fear that interests me most today. It is your knowledge of the present crime. Pierce swallowed. I have told you everything I know, he said. The shadow in the library, the coat, the missing key. Poirot stepped closer to the desk. You told us that you thought the shadow was Dr. Shaw at first, he said. Was that entirely true? Pierce looked trapped. I did not want to accuse anyone, he said, but I also did not want to hold back. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. You are leaving something out, she said gently, not from cruelty, but from fear. Pierce's shoulders slumped. I saw the figure approach the manuscript case, he said. I saw a hand reach toward the lock. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor and I drew back. I did not want to be caught spying. When I stepped forward again, the figure had gone and the room seemed empty. I assumed they had left by the side door. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the professor? He asked. Was he alive at that moment? Pierce stared at the floor. I do not know, he said in a strained voice. I did not see him clearly. I saw only the desk and the light from the lamp. It was very quick. Miss Marple asked softly, Why did you not say this earlier? Because, Pierce said in a strangled whisper, I am afraid that if I admit I saw more, I will be blamed for not raising the alarm. Poirot nodded slowly. Fear has guided your choices for a very long time, Mr. Pierce, he said. First with Arthur Greer, now with this. Pierce's voice shook. Do you think Thomas Greer could have done it? He asked. Miss Marple answered quietly. No, she said. I think he came to seek a different kind of justice. Poirot added, and he had no need for the manuscript to vanish. He wished it studied properly, not stolen. Pierce closed his eyes. Then who? He whispered. Poirot considered him for a moment. Tell me, Poirot said, who else knew you felt guilty about your testimony against Arthur Greer? Pierce frowned. Only one person, he said slowly. Dr. Hargrave himself. I went to him some years after the incident and confessed my doubts. He assured me that we had acted correctly. He told me to let it rest. Miss Marple's voice was soft. He wished to keep the past quiet, she said, perhaps because he feared what questions it might raise about his own conduct. Pierce nodded weakly. I wanted to believe him, he said, but I never truly managed it. Poirot glanced at Miss Marple. We must speak with Mr. Greer again, Poirot said, and also with Edward Hargrave. There may be more to this matter of inheritance than we know. Miss Marple agreed. And we must pay attention to those who knew both stories, she said. The old scandal and the new manuscript. That list is not very long. They left the librarian sitting alone at his desk, his head bowed over his hands. As they walked back through the library, the silence felt heavier than before. He is not our killer, Miss Marple said quietly, but he is one of the saddest pieces on the board. Poirot nodded. Yes, a witness who could have spoken earlier, but did not. Such people rarely commit crimes, but they provide the shadows where crimes can grow. They reached the doorway and paused. Outside, the college bell rang again, slow and solemn. Miss Marple looked toward the cloisters, where faint footsteps echoed. The past has returned, she said. Now the present waits for its reckoning. Poirot looked thoughtful. And the circle, he said, narrows again. Chapter 6. Footsteps in the cloisters. Night settled slowly over Oxford, bringing a soft hush to the narrow streets and ancient courtyards. Lamplight flickered against the walls of Street Aldwyn College, casting long shadows across the cloisters. The arches seemed darker than usual, as though the building itself were holding its breath. Poirot stood near the entrance to the northern wing, his hands clasped behind his back. Miss Marple came toward him with her quiet, steady steps. Everything is prepared? She asked gently. Poirot nodded. Yes. The police patrol the Baki perimeter discreetly. Sir Reginald has ensured that no one leaves the college without being seen, and we, he said, will observe who feels compelled to return to the scene of the crime. Miss Marple looked up at the sky. It is a calm night, she said. Calm nights often trouble guilty minds. They prefer noise to hide in. Poirot smiled lightly. You have much experience with troubled minds, mademoiselle. She returned a small smile. Villages are full of them, she said. College halls are simply bigger villages. They walked into the cloisters together. The air was cold. Their footsteps echoed softly on the stone floor. Across the courtyard, a few windows were still lit, professors marking papers, students studying late, the occasional flicker of someone pacing. Poirot stopped beside a stone pillar. "There is something you observed earlier," he said. "Something you have not yet told me." Miss Marple looked thoughtful. "Yes," she said at last. "When Mr. Pierce described the figure he saw, he spoke of a coat like Edward Hargrave's and a height that did not match Edward. That troubled me. Coats can be borrowed." Poirot nodded slowly. "Borrowed," he repeated, "or stolen." They moved deeper into the cloister. A faint sound drifted toward them, a quiet shuffle, like someone brushing against a wall. Poirot raised his hand. They stopped. There it was again, a soft, hesitant step. Poirot whispered, "Someone watches us." Miss Marple remained calm. "It will be someone who believes we are discovering too much," she said, "and who wishes to know how close we are." Poirot moved behind a pillar, Miss Marple beside him. The hallway at the far end of the cloister grew darker. A shadow appeared for a moment, then slipped away. "Come, Raid," Poirot murmured. They walked, slowly but purposefully, toward the far end. Their footsteps stayed measured, giving no sign of urgency. When they reached the corner, no one was there, only the faint smell of old stone and a distant draught from an open door. Miss Marple touched the doorframe. "This was opened recently," she said. "Someone passed through." The door led to a narrow passage connecting the cloister to the old library storage room. The passage was barely lit. The walls were rough stone, and dust clung to the corners. They stepped inside. Poirot spoke quietly. "If our intruder came this way, he may not have expected us to follow." Miss Marple nodded. "Criminals often believe others will think as they do. They do not consider patience." They walked deeper until they reached the storage room. It was dim, lit only by a small lamp in the corner. Shelves held stacks of old books that had not been used for years. Poirot examined the floor. "Footprints," he said softly. "Someone was here moments ago." Miss Marple pointed toward the shelves. "And something was taken," she said. "Look, there is a gap." Poirot examined it. "A reference book on medieval seals," he said. "This would be useful to someone studying the manuscript, or to someone trying to understand a symbol from the torn page." Miss Marple's voice was calm but firm. "This is not random wandering," she said. "It is someone searching for confirmation." Poirot looked around slowly. "They return because they fear we saw clues they overlooked," he said. "They return because something in this room matters deeply." They searched carefully. Miss Marple opened a small chest in the corner. Inside were old catalogues and ink-dried quills. Poirot examined a stack of parchment rolls. Then Miss Marple paused. "Poirot," she said softly, "look." On the floor near the back wall lay a scrap of fabric. Poirot picked it up. It was small, dark, and torn at the edge. "A coat lining," Poirot said. "Fine wool, not cheap." Miss Marple nodded. "And not a student's coat," she added. Poirot touched the fabric thoughtfully. "Someone tried to move quietly," he said, "but the shelves here are close together. A coat sleeve could easily snag." Miss Marple stepped back. "Who wears such coats?" she asked gently. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Dr. Shaw," he said, "and Sir Reginald, and Edward Hargrave this morning." Miss Marple shook her head. "Edward's coat was lighter in colour," she said, "and Sir Reginald would have no reason to sneak through passages." Poirot thought for a moment. "And Dr. Shaw," he said, "though he claims to have nothing to hide." Miss Marple touched the fabric again. "Shaw seems the type who would defend himself with pride," she said. "But this fabric, it feels older than his usual clothing." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Older," he echoed, "like the coat of someone who has worked in this college for many years." Miss Marple nodded. The librarian," she said softly. "Pierce Poirot slipped the fabric into his pocket. "And yet," he said, Pierce seemed terrified, not cunning. Miss Marple gave a small sigh. "Terror does not always belong to the innocent," she said. "It also belongs to the guilty." Poirot stepped back. "We must speak with Pierce again," he said, "but carefully. He may know more than he realizes." A faint scrape broke the silence. They turned quickly. The shadows shifted in the far corner of the room. Poirot stepped forward, but the figure was already gone, slipping through another narrow door that led outside to the garden path. Poirot followed to the door but stopped when he reached the threshold. "Too late," he said. "They anticipated our approach." Miss Marple came beside him. "They will return," she said, "until they get what they want." Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "and that means we will catch them." The moon hung low over the college, casting pale light across the empty lawns. The air was cool and still. Poirot and Miss Marple walked along the garden path outside the storage room, following the faint footprints in the soft earth. The path curved around the back of the cloisters. A hedge rustled in the breeze, and a few early autumn leaves drifted across the stones. Poirot crouched beside the hedge. "The footprints end here," he said. "Our intruder stepped on solid stone to avoid leaving a trail." Miss Marple looked up at the building. "The nearest entrance," she said, "is the back door to the librarian's office." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Indeed," he said. "The one Pierce claims he never uses at night." They walked toward the small stone doorway. It was slightly ajar. Poirot touched it. "Recently opened," he murmured. "The hinges are warm from friction." Miss Marple glanced at him with quiet understanding. "Then Pierce was not alone in the library earlier," she said. "Someone else knew of this passage." Poirot stepped inside. The corridor was narrow, leading straight into the main library. The shelves loomed dark and silent. The desks were faintly outlined in moonlight spilling through the high windows. Poirot paused, then whispered, "Listen." A faint sound drifted through the room, a soft, rhythmic noise, someone flipping pages. Miss Marple pointed gently toward a far corner, where a reading lamp cast a sea-netting, dim, golden circle of light. The librarian, Mr. Pierce, sat at a desk, trembling. Before him lay several books, one open, others stacked beside him. His hands shook as he turned another page. Poirot and Miss Marple approached quietly. "Mr. Pierce," Poirot said softly. Pierce jumped, eyes wide, with fear. I came to search," he stammered. "I thought perhaps I could find what the killer was looking for." Poirot folded his arms. "And what do you believe they wanted?" Pierce looked miserable. "The torn section," he said. "Something about family names, something that could change the interpretation of the manuscript." Miss Marple stepped gently to the table. "You seem very afraid," she said softly. "Are you afraid of the killer, or of something from the past?" "Today." Pierce closed his eyes. "Both," he whispered. Poirot leaned slightly forward. "And which fear brought you back?" "Tonight?" Pierce hesitated. "The fear," he said, voice trembling, "that what I did 20 years ago is connected to this, that perhaps the truth in the manuscript could expose my mistake." Miss Marple shook her head kindly. "Mistakes from youth rarely lead to murder," she said, "but hiding them for decades can make a person vulnerable." Pierce looked at her with pained eyes. "Do you think the killer knows about it?" Poirot answered carefully. "We do not yet know what the killer knows, but we do know that they were here tonight. Someone moved through the passages. Someone watched us." Pierce paled. "Watched?" he whispered. Poirot nodded. "Yes, and someone dropped this." He placed the fabric scrap on the table. Pierce stared at it. "That is not from my coat," he said quickly. "Mine is cotton. This is wool." Miss Marple touched the fabric. "Then the killer disguised themselves," she said, "or borrowed a coat that resembles yours." Poirot nodded. "Someone wished to create confusion," he said. "Someone wished us to suspect you." Pierce's voice trembled. "Who? Who would do such a thing?" Miss Marple answered quietly. "Someone who knows your connection to the old case. Someone who knows you, admitted Doubt. Pierce shook his head, fear overtaking him. You mean Dr. Hargrave might have told someone? Poirot said slowly. Or someone overheard your conversation with him years ago. A silence settled over the room. Pierce whispered, You must believe me. I did not kill him. Poirot touched his shoulder gently. I believe you, Poirot said kindly, but your fear makes you easy to manipulate. Miss Marple nodded. And that is what the killer intends. Pierce looked helpless. What should I do? Miss Marple answered softly. Tell us everything, she said. Every whisper from the past, every person who knew of your doubts, every moment you shared with the professor recently. Pierce hesitated, then nodded slowly. I will tell you, he said, but there is something else. Something I found last night but was too afraid to show you. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Show us now, he said. Pierce reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. Poirot opened it. Miss Marple gasped softly. It was the missing corner of the torn page. And on it was a name that tied the entire manuscript to someone still alive. Poirot stared at it with quiet intensity. So, he said, the motive becomes clear. Miss Marple's voice was steady. And now, she said, the murderer will become desperate. Chapter 7. The name on the parchment. Poirot unfolded the torn parchment slowly, holding it under the lamplight. The ink was faded but still readable. Miss Marple leaned forward gently, her calm eyes following each letter with careful attention. Mr. Pierce sat trembling, his hands pressed tightly together. The parchment contained a short passage from the medieval manuscript. The missing corner revealed a single line of Latin text, and below it, written in Hargrave's careful handwriting, was the professor's commentary. Poirot read it quietly. Inheritance by direct lineage. The seal belongs to the family of Hargrave. Miss Marple let out a soft breath. So the Mycansum manuscript was connected to the professor's own ancestry, she said. No wonder he guarded it so closely. Pierce looked shocked. You mean he was studying his own lineage? He asked. He never mentioned such a thing. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. It appears the manuscript contained information about an ancestor of his, perhaps something he did not wish the world to know, or perhaps something others wished to use. Miss Marple studied the parchment more closely. Hargrave was translating a section that referred to property rights and disputed claims, she said. If the seal matches his family, then the manuscript might prove something important about their land, their history, or their reputation. Pierce looked miserable. I should have shown you this earlier, he whispered. I found it on the floor of the archive room. I assumed the killer dropped it. I was frightened. Poirot placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Fear is a powerful enemy, he said, but you have helped us now. Miss Marple added kindly, this piece explains much, but not everything. Poirot paced slowly between the shelves. Let us consider each suspect, he said. First, Doctor. Sure, ambitious, frustrated, and eager to publish, but would he care about the professor's ancestry? Miss Marple shook her head. It does not suit his motives, she said. He wants knowledge, not family matters. Poirot nodded. Next, Clara Finch. Loyal to the professor, respectful, hard-working. She would never steal a manuscript or harm him. Miss Marple agreed. She is frightened of knowledge used wrongly, not hungry for it. Poirot continued pacing. Then we have Edward Hargrave, the nephew. He relies on his uncle's support. If the will changed, he might lose his security. But the nephew does not understand the manuscript. He would not know where to begin. Miss Marple nodded slowly. He is troubled, but not deceptive. Poirot stopped walking. And then there is Thomas Greer. He sought the manuscript for personal justice, but he did not wish to harm the professor. He believed the manuscript held truth, not fortune. Miss Marple agreed. Yes, he is wounded, but not dangerous. Poirot lifted the parchment again. That leaves someone else, he said. Someone who knew of the professor's research, someone who knew of his fear, someone who had access to both the manuscript and the archive. Pierce blinked. You mean someone on the staff? Poirot nodded. Someone who was close to the professor. Miss Marple's eyes softened. Someone who might have known about the disputed lineage, she said, or who feared what the professor was planning to reveal. Poirot folded the parchment. We must question Edward again, he said, and Mr. Greer, and then Sir Reginald. Pierce looked startled. Sir Reginald? He asked. But he is the principal. Why would he? Poirot held up a hand. We question all, he said, especially those who fear public scandal. Miss Marple stood. And we must do so quietly, she said. If the murderer learns that we know what is written on that parchment, they will act quickly. Poirot slipped the torn corner securely inside his coat pocket. Then let us speak to Edward first, he said. He may know more of his family's history than he admitted. They left the library and walked along the corridor toward the guest rooms. The building was silent except for the faint ringing of the evening bell. The sky outside had grown darker, the edges of clouds glowing faintly in the moonlight. Edward Hargrave's room was at the end of a long hallway. Poirot knocked gently. Mr. Edward, he called, may we speak with you? There was a brief silence, then footsteps approached. The door opened slowly. Edward stood in the doorway, his face pale. Oh, he said, it is you. What is happening? The college feels so heavy tonight. Poirot stepped inside, Miss Marple following. We have found something in the archive, Poirot said. Something related to your family. Edward blinked. My family? Poirot handed him the translation notes without the torn corner. Oh, do you recognize these symbols? Poirot asked. Edward studied them uncertainly. No, he said. I have never seen them before. Miss Marple asked gently. Did your uncle ever speak of your ancestors, or of an old dispute? Edward frowned. He said once that our family had owned land centuries ago, he said, but I never cared about such things. He was very proud of our heritage. I thought it was just academic interest. Poirot watched him closely. And if the manuscript proved something unfavorable, Poirot asked, would you have feared it? Edward looked genuinely bewildered. No, he said. I hardly know anything about it. Even if there was some old dispute, it would not matter to me. Miss Marple nodded softly. He is telling the truth, she whispered. Poirot agreed. But there is still someone who cares, he said. Someone who feared exposure. Edward's eyes widened. You think the murder was because of something in that manuscript? Not for money or rivalry? Poirot nodded slowly. Yes, he said. I believe the key to the murder lies in what your uncle discovered about his own lineage. Edward sank into a chair. Then who would want to hide it? He asked. Who would fear the truth? Miss Marple said quietly. Someone who might gain or lose something depending on what the manuscript proved. Edward looked helpless. I wish I could help you, he said, but I know nothing. Poirot thanked him gently, then led Miss Marple out into the hallway. Poirot whispered softly, he is innocent. Miss Marple nodded. The truth is circling closer, she said. Poirot's eyes sparkled with intensity. Then we must find Sir Reginald, he said. He has been principal for many years. He knows the college's history, and he may know the Hargrave family history as well. They made their way to the principal's office. The door was slightly open, light spilling into the hallway. Poirot knocked. Sir Reginald? He called. There was no answer. Miss Marple gently pushed the door wider. Inside, the office was empty, but the window stood open, curtains fluttering slightly. Poirot walked to the desk. A book lay open on the table. Miss Marple came beside him. The open page displayed a genealogy chart, and one name at the bottom had been circled in ink. Miss Marple whispered, So, it is true. Poirot nodded slowly. Yes, he said. We are very close. Behind them, a faint sound echoed in the corridor. Footsteps. Someone had been listening, and now that someone was walking away quietly, Poirot immediately stepped into the hallway. But the corridor was already empty. The faint sound of footsteps faded into silence. Somewhere deep within the college, Miss Marple joined him calmly. "Someone heard us," she said softly. "Someone who did not wish to be seen." Poirot nodded. "Yes, and someone who knows the way through the college far too well to leave tracks." They returned to the office. The open genealogy book lay on the desk, the circled name glowing softly under the lamplight. The name was Reginald Vale. Miss Marple lowered herself carefully into the nearest chair. "So," she said quietly, "Sir Reginald's family is part of the same lineage." Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes. It appears the manuscript refers not only to the Hargrave family, but also to the Vale family, perhaps an old dispute between them, perhaps the truth of ownership or inheritance." Miss Marple studied the genealogy. "Whatever the professor discovered," she said, "it may have threatened the principal's reputation, his family history, or perhaps even his position at the college." Poirot walked slowly around the desk. "And Sir Reginald was the person who feared scandal the most," he said. "He spoke of reputation, tradition, protecting the college from shame." Miss Marple nodded. "And he had access to the archive, the library, and the professor." Poirot tapped the torn parchment in his pocket. "And he might have known the significance of the missing page," he said, "more than anyone else." Miss Marple looked thoughtful. "But would he kill for it?" she asked. "He does not seem violent." Poirot paused. "Murder is often committed by those who see no other way to preserve what they value," he said. "Sir Reginald values history, reputation, legacy. If the manuscript threatened to expose something shameful in his ancestry, he might have feared it enough to act." Miss Marple folded her hands. "But we must be sure," she said. "Accusing the principal is a grave step." Poirot agreed. "We need proof," he said. "Something concrete." Just then they heard hurried footsteps. The door swung open and Sir Reginald himself entered the room. His expression was drawn and his hands tightened around a stack of papers. "Ah," he said, forcing a smile. "I did not expect you both here. What brings you back to my office?" Poirot returned a polite bow. "We wish to speak about the genealogy book," he said. "The one on your desk." Sir Reginald stiffened. "Oh," he said. "That? Yes. I was reviewing some old family records. Pure curiosity, I assure you." Poirot watched him closely. "You seem troubled, Sir Reginald." The principal forced another smile. "These are troubling days, Mr. Poirot." Miss Marple looked at him gently. "The manuscript speaks of inheritance," she said softly. "Did you know it referred to your family as well as the professor's?" Sir Reginald's smile faded. He sank slowly into his chair. "I suspected," he whispered. "I have always known there was a connection. My family and the Hargraves have lived near each other for generations. There was an old dispute over land, but I believed it settled long ago." Poirot asked quietly, "And if the manuscript revealed otherwise?" Sir Reginald's hands trembled. "I would not want this college dragged into a dispute among families," he said. "Nor would I want my family's name mocked." Poirot nodded. "A motive arises," he said gently. Sir Reginald looked stunned. "You cannot possibly think I harmed Malcolm," he said. "He was a friend, a colleague." Poirot observed him silently for a moment. "You were the last person to see him alive before the ceremony," Poirot said. "Is that correct?" Sir Reginald hesitated. "Yes," he said. "He came to see me in the afternoon. He looked troubled. He said he had discovered something important about the manuscript, something he wished to announce soon." Poirot asked, "And did he tell you what it was?" "Sir," Reginald swallowed. "No," he said. "He only said it would affect more families than his own. That was the last I saw of him." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "He trusted you," she said. Sir Reginald lowered his head. "I know," he whispered. Poirot stepped closer. "Did you go to the library before the ceremony?" Poirot asked. Sir Reginald looked shocked. "No," he said quickly. "Why would I? I was preparing for the event." Miss Marple asked gently, And after the ceremony began, did you leave the hall at any time? Sir Reginald hesitated. Yes, he said at last, only briefly. I felt faint. I stepped into the corridor for fresh air. But I did not go to the library. Poirot studied him closely. You left through the western corridor? Yes, Sir Reginald said. Poirot's voice was calm, but the window in the library's northern wing was opened, the same window near the D4S passage that leads past this office. Sir Reginald's face tightened. I do not know anything about that, he said. Poirot placed the torn parchment on the desk. Someone tore this from the manuscript, he said. Someone who understood its importance. Sir Reginald stared at it with wide eyes. I have never seen that before. Miss Marple watched him silently. Poirot asked softly, who else would know of your family's connection to the manuscript? Sir Reginald hesitated. Then he whispered, only one person, someone who has served this college longer than anyone else. Poirot's eyes widened slightly. Pierce, he said. Sir Reginald nodded slowly. Yes, Howard Pierce once helped catalogue my family documents when I first became principal. He knows our history well. Poirot and Miss Marple exchanged a sharp look. Miss Marple whispered. Pierce was terrified. But was it fear of being blamed or fear of what he knows? Sir Reginald pressed his hands to his face. I do not know anything for certain, he said, but Pierce has always known more than he should. Poirot spoke calmly. There is one way to discover the truth. We must gather everyone, all suspects, all witnesses. Miss Marple nodded. The truth is ready to be revealed, she said. Poirot stood. And the murderer, he said softly, knows that time is running out, and Oxford, with its quiet spires and ancient stones, slowly breathed again. And so, under the quiet Oxford sky, the mystery finally reached its end. The truth, once hidden in shadows, stepped gently into the light. A long-buried injustice was uncovered. A frightened man found his courage, and a fearful leader answered for the choices he made. The stolen manuscript returned to its rightful place, ready to reveal the precisely history it had protected for centuries. Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot parted with quiet respect, each knowing justice had been served. The college, shaken but wiser, slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. Students opened their books again, scholars resumed their work, and the ancient halls regained their calm. Some mysteries leave behind bitterness, but this one brought understanding. Old wounds were healed, and new truths found their rightful place. As dawn touched the rooftops, Oxford stood peaceful once more. If you enjoy the story, subscribe to Candlelight Mystery for the next videos.